So greetings of peace, everyone. Welcome to this panel discussion. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending from where are you joining us today, as we have speakers from literally all over the world. It is my great pleasure to welcome all of you, either who are following us on the live stream on different channels. As I said, this will be the panel discussion under the title Countering Hate Speech, Interfaith and Intergenerational Perspectives. This is organized as a part of the KAICIID Fellowship program. Myself, Leila Hassan Dejjab, and my colleague Emina Ferdak are, beside other roles that we are having, we are also KAICIID Fellows. So as a part of our final KAICIID Fellowship program, we decided to organize this webinar on the occasion of the World Interfaith Harmony Week. And even though World Interfaith Harmony Week is happening at the first week of the February, as we all know, there is plenty of activities organized throughout the month of the February, and one of that is today's panel discussion that we are organizing. So I would just like to shortly introduce all co-organizers of today's panel discussion. The first one is, of course, KAICIID International Dialogue Center, as we are their fellows. So the KAICIID Fellowship program brings together leaders and educators from different religious backgrounds from all over the world for training in dialogue facilitation, intercultural communication, and promoting social cohesion. And this is all done by the pool of KAICIID experts. The program equips fellows with the skills to educate their students and communities about interreligious dialogue so they can become facilitators and leaders in the dialogue and active peace advocates in their communities. And we hope that today's panel discussion will contribute to this aim as well. The second organizer is Youth for Peace, which is youth-led organization from Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Youth for Peace bring young people of diverse religious and spiritual expression coming from different cultures and tradition backgrounds from all over the Bosnia and Herzegovina. And this organization is established to promote dialogue, interfaith and interethnic cooperation, to end all kinds of violence and to create culture of peace and justice for youth. Youth for Peace is also CC of United Religion Initiative, which is our third partner on this webinar. So United Religion Initiative is a global grassroots interfaith network that cultivates peace and justice by engaging people to bridge religious and cultural differences and work together for the good of their communities and the world. URI Europe is one of the 8 URI regions, and I'm very glad to say that URI is present in more than 111 countries currently, with more than 1,000 groups called cooperation circles, and Youth for Peace is one of them. You can find more information about all these organizations on the links that will be provided during the live stream. Now I would like to welcome all of our panelists of today's discussion. We have very nice group of people coming together from all over the world, as I said. So welcome again. Thank you very much for making extra effort to join us today, despite all these time differences and a lot of activities that is happening throughout the month of February. We are really happy that you accepted our invitation. And we decided to discuss about this topic of countering hate speech from perspective of interfaith and also intergenerational perspective, because we know, unfortunately, that today's hate speech is present all over the world, and especially now when we are using the social media and when we are all present in the online sphere so much. So we thought that this will be very important to discuss what can be done in terms of bringing people from different backgrounds together, not just in the religious sense, but also a different generation. Therefore, we would like to hear what our distinguished speaker had to say on this topic, and I would like to invite Tahil Sharma. He is regional coordinator for North America in United Religion Initiative. So Tahil, welcome. I will just shortly introduce him. So Tahil is an interfaith activist based in Los Angeles, United States of America. He was born to a Hindu father and a Sikh mother. Following the Oak Creek shooting of Sikh temple in 2012, Tahil became involved in efforts for interfaith literacy and social justice, and he has also been doing this work professionally for the past 8 or 9 years. He also serves as the Los Angeles coordinator for Sadhana, which is Coalition of Progressive Hindus, and he also served in various organizations in different capacity to educate, engage, and serve various communities that promote interfaith cooperation and ethical pluralism and social and productive norms in society, including Interfaith Youth Corps, the Parliament of the World Religion, of course, his role in United Religion Initiative, and much more. So I think that Tahil is a great person to give us input on the topic that we are discussing today about countering hate speech as a young person, as also a person who is working quite a lot in interfaith field. So Tahil, we are happy to have you with us today, and please, floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Leila. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. It's such an important time for us to be able to talk about countering hate speech, mainly because the nature of how we address it has been sort of a constant question in the context of many countries in the world, but particularly in the United States, in a country that professes an idea of the freedom of speech. There has been a very troubled aspect in approaching this idea of what is acceptable speech and what is not acceptable speech. And coming from a space where I work with a lot of religious and spiritual communities, I know that especially in the space of the United Religions Initiative, the nature of how we engage in this work is centered around creating a space for appreciative inquiry, getting to know people as much as possible, and trying to deepen our understanding of them as making it a process of deeply understanding ourselves as people. And what happens in this work sometimes can be very challenging because the nature of doing dialogue in the context of interfaith cooperation, especially, makes it especially challenging to be able to address differences in a way that make us really feel like we can really empathize with other people. And sometimes the nature of empathy can be itself very challenging because we like to use the framework of filling in or feeling as if we are in someone else's shoes. But what happens when you can't actually fit into those shoes? What if those shoes feel uncomfortable? The nature of empathy is actually to go a little more than just trying to make sure that you know the exact person's experience. You don't need to know their suffering to be able to help them. You don't need to experience their exact suffering to be able to help them either. What you do need to understand is the nature of building those powerful bridges between communities and individuals requires us to be able to step into a space of solidarity, to step into a space of that appreciative inquiry that allows us to go a lot deeper than we usually do when we're stepping into spaces that are unknown or uncomfortable to us. And in the United States, for the past several decades, the ability of mitigating the speech that is sort of targeted towards many minority religious and cultural and ethnic communities continues to be a challenge today, because it is in the nature of how we understand even our own United States Constitution that interpretations allow people to understand the nature of the freedom of speech as very different things. For me, entering this perspective, personally speaking, the nature of having freedom of speech is essential to the way that we interact with each other, but we need to remind people that a speech has consequence, both good and bad. And the nature of how, the intention and the ways that you're expressing the speech are essential in how you are able to make or break communities. And in my work personally, as someone who's been doing interfaith work for just about a decade now, while at the same time being someone that is deeply involved in the mission and values of the United Religions Initiative, it becomes very clear that when we center an interfaith narrative or an interfaith foundation to the nature of dialogue, we are able to actually mitigate hate speech in ways that we haven't been able to see before. The nature of this work of standing up for communities that are facing things like anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, specific examples, tend to be pushed by a lot of misinformation, by a lot of conspiracy theories that are both historical and new. And it took a lot of interfaith communities to show up for Muslims and Jews here in the United States to make them feel like they were not alone. and to be able to start deeper conversations with them in engaging this idea that solidarity looks like a lot more than just seeing you when you're happy and seeing you when you're sad. It's being able to show up and say, what do you need and how can we keep this relationship flourishing? So that's kind of the context I'm bringing in this morning. Albeit it may not be comparable to others' experiences who in around the world, having interfaith dialogue can be something beautiful, but it can also be something that can get boring after a while when it is the same people talking about the same things. But there is an active role that each of us can play in making sure that we are talking about things that are transformative in being able to improve societies. So thank you for that this morning, Leila.
Thank you very much, Tahil, for this very valuable input. And I think that you already started this discussion and highlighted some very important thing. As you said, we definitely need to discuss about empathy, but beyond just understanding of the empathy, but stepping outside of our comfort zone and providing space for dialogue with others. And also it is great to hear what is URI doing all over the world, especially stepping not just into shoes of others, but also trying to protect others when they are attacked and standing there for them. So thank you very much for sending this very important message. Now we would like to go to another young person who is Sahil, was joining us from the United States, where it is early morning. Now we are going in the middle of the night to the Philippines, and it is my great pleasure to introduce Renz Argaro, who is coming from different roles that he's having and a huge biography. But as Tahil is coming from United Religion Initiative, Argaro is coming from another very big organization, Religion for Peace. So I just want to shortly first introduce Renz, even it is very hard to introduce him shortly, as he's quite young person, but with impressive and huge biography. So Dr. Renz Argao is the President and Chief Executive Officer of Argao Health International. He is a registered psychologist and psychometrician, and international also certified expert in the psychotrauma. He is one of the handful of Filipinos who hold the status of diplomat of the American Academy of Experts in Traumatic Stress, and his work as clinical psychologist include over a decade of experience in clinical administration, case management, psychological assessment, psychotherapy, mental health, and psychosocial support services. He also works in quite a lot of conflict areas, and in addition to his impressive clinical practice, Dr. Renz is also a peace activist, and he is engaged in a faith-based diplomacy and development work through Religion for Peace. He is coordinator of the International Youth Committee of Religion for Peace, which is the world's largest and most representative multi-religious coalition, where he also serves as a member of the World Council of Religious Leaders, as well as International Executive Committee. And he also has quite impressive academic career. And as you know, he's also holding the PhD diploma. And I think that I will stop over here, because if I continue, it will take half hour to go through all your impressive biography. But once again, thank you very much for accepting to be with us today, and we are looking forward to hear your input on this important topic. So Renz, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Leila, for that introduction. I can feel that you're overwhelmed. I got overwhelmed with the introduction as well. Good evening from my side of the world, from the Philippines. Good morning, good afternoon to wherever you may be. And I'm happy to be joining you in this panel, in this session that we're having today. It's very important and timely to talk about hate speech and what we can do to counter it, especially at this time wherein hate speech is becoming a major threat to peace. Largely due to the now more connected world that we live in, of course, thanks to the internet and our social media platforms. And the social media platforms and their companies seem to continuously allow the proliferation of various expressions that advocate, initiate, promote, or even justify hatred, violence, and discrimination all over the world. And all of this are disguised in the context of the freedom of expression, or as Tahil mentioned, the freedom of speech. And true, we have that freedom to express ourselves, but let us not forget that freedom is not absolute. As Victor Hugo puts it, the liberty or the freedom of one citizen ends where the liberty or freedom of another citizen begins. That is, your freedom ends where my freedom begins. And hate speech is not mere expression of opinions or of your thoughts or your ideas or an exercise of the freedom of speech. It is one that can already step on and one that is violating the fundamental human rights that each of us should be able to enjoy. The European Commission Against Racism and Intolerance already recognized that there is a dangerous link between hate speech and violence. They add that hate speech possesses grave dangers for the cohesion of a democratic society, the protection of human rights, and even the rule of law. For many of us, we have witnessed this in many circumstances. For us Asians, for example, many of my fellow Asians have been injured. Worse, some of them have been killed due to anti-Asian expressions, especially when the COVID-19 pandemic started. Hate speech directed against Asians, especially due to misinformation and racism, stigma and stereotypes, have caused fear, trauma, and suffering to many Asian communities in the West. Here in my own country, in the Philippines, hate speech is already a weapon of choice when it comes to political propaganda. It was expressions or speeches or even jokes that are filled with stigma that was used to justify the deaths of thousands of people in what they called the war on drugs. It was also hate speech that brought emotional trauma to those who were even given or receiving death threats. Some were being intimidated, and some are being wished to be killed, to be sick, or even to be raped. And it is hate speech that continues to divide our people and that threatens the very fabric of our own society. And this is not just in the Philippines, this happens in many different parts of the world. Now, when we look at it, why is there so much hate speech? Well, we can't just blame social media, of course, and the internet. We also have to look at the role of our own values and our ethics. For us people of faith, for example, we often look up to our religious leaders in our religious institutions to guide us when it comes to fighting hate speech. All of our religions and faith traditions teach us love, and none of these religions, none of our faith traditions teach hate. So when we see hate speech being normalized, we get to wonder why our own values and principles are leading to this hate speech. Where are our values and principles, those that make humanity human, in this context that lead us to hating one another or to promote violence against one another? Why are we not reminded or even taught the value of respect, human dignity, or even care for the other? Why do some leaders or those who should be guiding us towards what is good or those who ignite the flame of hate speech? What are we doing or what are we not doing? For the youth, hate speech is something that seems so common nowadays. And not that I'm saying that it is common for the youth to use hate speech. What I mean is that the youth can read, hear, or encounter hate speech in almost every day of their lives. It is on social media, in the mainstream media, in the streets, or in places where we gather. Sadly, I even once heard while I'm in church. The thing is, we, the youth, have the potential and the power to combat hate speech. The youth of today is the largest generation of the youth that is known in the history of human civilization. Today's generation of youth is also the more connected. Well, that's a good side of the internet and social media. Hence, if we use this connectivity to influence positive changes and to counter expressions of violence, hatred, and discrimination, we can effect a shift from hate speech to speech that respects human dignity and human rights. The youth is also more motivated and driven by their passion to make this world a better place. We can use this to start conversations that highlight collaboration, common actions, and harmony. We can talk about what peace means and what we can do to achieve it. We can share and discuss our values and ethical principles that can help fill in the gaps that allow hate speech to start and to even grow. More than that, we can start by taking actions like calling out our friends and educating them about the impact of hate speech. We can also do so by standing up for others and by being the voice for those who are silenced. I too have seen how young people have fought hate speech. We have a friend in Myanmar that started a campaign on what they call as love speech on social media. They respond basically to any hate speech with love and care and respect. A friend in India organized learning sessions to talk about the impact of hate speech and the danger it brings using sports, using activities that are allowing young children to learn better about values and ethics. It is possible to bring change. We just have to take that first step towards it. Let us teach empathy. Tahil mentioned empathy a while ago, as well as understanding. Let us promote and celebrate diversity and inclusivity. Let us turn back to our faith and values. We also need, of course, to be mindful of our own thoughts, which then becomes deeds and words. We all need to find the root causes of hate speech and counter or best to address these. Let us advocate for the important balance between ending hate speech while still promoting and, of course, protecting the freedom of speech, expression, and belief. We need to hold platforms like social media platforms accountable for hate speech. Report those social media accounts that promote hate speech or those that incite violence. Demand actions from social media platforms and hold their companies accountable. Of course, let us not forget that we need to give support as well for those individuals who are victims and targets of hate speech. We can all do this together only if we work together. This emerging tradition of hate in speech and actions has gone a long, long time. So let us all choose to be the generation that breaks the habit on behalf of the world and of generations to come. So again, thank you for having me. I hope I was able to share some of insights from this side of the world and from our generation to all of you. Thank you very much, and may peace be upon you all.
Thank you very much, Renzo, and I hope that you are okay for me calling you Renzo. We are almost the similar age, so Dr. Argao seems a little bit
Renzo is
too official.
perfect.
Great. Thank you very much for bringing this insight and for sending this important message. And I'm sure that all our listeners on our live stream got really inspired by all these words that you share, and you highlighted, same as Tahil, very important things, because we usually forget that hate speech is not just hate speech somewhere online, but that it is affecting people in offline, and that it can lead to the hate crime and a lot of terrible things that you mentioned, some of them that are happening. But on the other side, it's great to know that young people are starting these great initiatives that you mentioned, some of them, and we definitely need more love and more peace and less hate. And we hope that this webinar will contribute into bringing a little bit more positive stories into this space where there is too much hate present every day. So thank you once again, and I'm looking forward to our question and answer discussion, because I'm sure that there will be some question in line with all these great initiatives that you mentioned. And now we are moving to, if I may say, a little bit older generation, because as we said, this is intergenerational approach. So more wisdom that we are looking forward to hear from our dear Sally. Sally, welcome, and thank you again really much for accepting our invitation to join us today, as you are really inspirational for a lot of us in URI, but I'm sure beyond URI as well. So I will just try to shortly introduce you, even it will be very hard to shortly introduce. So Sally Mahe is senior consultant, and she's a founding staff person of United Religion Initiative, so this great organization that I presented at the beginning. She has held senior staff position for over 20 years, and Sally formerly served as URI Director of Organization Development and Director of Global Programs as well in the United Religion Initiative. She worked primarily with regional staff across the world, and as senior consultant right now, Sally is on call for consultation and makes core URI values, practices, and in-depth organizational wisdom available to the URI community globally. Sally also co-authored The Birth of the Global Community in 2003, and another book is The Greater Democracy Day by Day. Sally also holds master's degree from Harvard, and she lives currently in the Bay Area with her family. And she maintains the blog Every Voices, which I highly recommend all of you to take a look at the URI website, as there is plenty of inspiring stories from URI community all over the world. And there she writes about the variety ways URI cooperation circles or member groups all over the world give voices to the URI and also contribute to its success. So thank you, Sally, for, as I said, founding URI and being inspirational person as you are. And I'm really looking forward to hear your perspective on today's topic. So floor is yours.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Layla. I so much appreciate your enthusiasm, and it's like receiving a flow of just earnest desire to do good and to be together at this moment. And again, I appreciate the fact that we get to have this conversation. It's so important, even though we think we know about it, to be engaged with ideas, with perspectives that really matter. And this really matters. I want to begin with a sentence: to ignore injustice hurts. I heard that a few days ago, and it stopped me in my tracks. To ignore injustice hurts. And they made me feel really, in a new way, the emotional connection between hate speech and our intrinsic need as human beings for justice. So we all maybe have experienced this topic from many perspectives, but it's important, I think, and I'm happy we get to talk about it here. We get to raise up these feelings and these issues here, because hate speech in all its forms is injustice. Hateful words or prejudice, making assumptions, ignoring, propaganda. They're not just bad behavior, but they violate justice and they hurt us as individuals and our societies. So to allow micro or macro expressions of hate speech to proliferate without confronting them, it rips at our souls and it degrades a nation. It's not just bad behavior, I think, but it's dangerous. It's dangerous habits, it's dangerous patterns that deeply hurt people and society. So we are called to confront our own interactions with hate speech. It requires introspection and personal choice. So what do we do when we maybe are confronted that we're helping to perpetrate it? What do we do when we witness it? What do we do when we're victims? So some choices are, we can just let an incident go by and kind of minimize its impact. We can remain fixed in a perspective and just unaware of assumptions we might hold. We can choose to let our own victimized feelings fester and get buried inside of us. We can choose to continue to spread the stories of the bad ways we've been treated by retelling these stories of mistreatment over and over. Now, I have personal experience with that. My daughter converted to Islam many years ago, and I have a Muslim in-law family and 3 grandkids, and we were out on the sidewalks, again, maybe three or 4 years ago. And yeah, here me and my daughter and little grandsons, and slurs, people hurled some hate language towards us as Muslims because she was wearing a hijab. So I had a choice then. And I often fell down. I just kept telling, do you know what happened to my daughter? Do you know what happened to us? Do you know what happened? I kept repeating and repeating a very ugly incident. Yes, it was emotional, but that made me realize that I forgot to say multitude kind, generous, protective, solidarity acts that they also experienced. So again, the choice of what we choose to amplify, what we choose to carry on, is really ours to make. So another choices that I think Tahil and Rens have spoken to, is that we can be open to learn. There's a lot of learning that's available to us now. We can be trained to recognize our own undiscovered prejudice within ourselves. We can learn more about becoming empathetic. I like to call it listening ears, but we're really listening hearts for people who we know are feeling afraid or feeling victimized by hate speech. We can practice, and it usually takes practice, to speak up against hate speech, especially when it's directed at us, and to take courage to intervene when we witness it. So I think each of these choices involve usually new behaviors for us and for organizations. So whether we're unaware perpetrators or angry or hurt victims, letting these kinds of experiences go by unattended, I believe it eats away at our insides and it infects our environment. So again, to ignore injustice hurts. As people have said here, the bad news is that hate speech in myriad forms is on the rise. It's fueled, as you all have said, social media, migration, insecurities from climate change, economic insecurity, and injustice, and unrelenting change. But the good news is that this kind of entrenched behavior of hate speech, which has been with us for a long time, is coming out of the shadows. It's demanding our attention. I did just a brief Google search before this to prepare for this call, and it turned up many different kinds of training programs in how to understand it, combat it, much of what was spoken here. I learned a new term, which you may know, called counter speech. So there's trainings now in counter speech, which is ways to present alternative narratives rather than censorship of offending speech. Counter speech is a direct response to hateful or harmful speech, which seeks to undermine it. So there are, as you know, there's lots of good training programs. So I encourage all the people listening to go online and to look for them. So I was asked to speak from an intergenerational perspective. And I think Layla and Amina invited me in part because I was involved in an intergenerational project hosted by URI a few years ago. So our aim of this project was to launch, you might say, a counter movement. We wanted to create new ways for elders and youth to interact. We wanted to just practice behaviors that would replace traditional attitudes and assumptions with meaningful listening and new ways of cooperating and standing with each other. So our purpose statement, I think, is still relevant. It says, our purpose is to establish an intentional international community of millennials and elders of different backgrounds to explore dialogue, relationship building, and cooperation between these generations. Our aim is to be a learning laboratory where we learn from each other by honestly addressing the issues our different generations face. Now, this project didn't take off, but I think its main intent is valid here at this time. So again, it goes to something really at the core in us, whether forms of bigotry happen among elders or youth, different people of diverse religions, classes, races. I believe what doesn't change is people's basic need for we each need to be seen. We each need to be heard. We each need to be understood. So people, I don't think, need to be agreed with as much as we need to be visible, to be given dignity for who we are. And I think most of us have experienced what it feels like to be misunderstood, rendered invisible, or without value. Most of us hold on to these bitter feelings. And when we've had our own words ignored or have been made invisible by another person or a cultural mindset, the hurt and the diminishment lurks inside of us. And it was not long ago, I think 2 years ago now, maybe last year, I participated in a URI panel led by young adults regarding the role of youth leaders in the interfaith movement. And I remembered I took notes and I heard these speakers express anger at being stereotyped or assumed to be people who are good at computers. Get the young people to help us with the internet. And I'm guilty as well. I heard the pain inside of the young people who say, well, we've been used as tokens by our organizations. They want young people to show up for them, but they don't really give us responsibility and authority. And I heard frustration about misguided compliments. Oh, the youth, the young people, we are relying on them at this time. We need them so much, but they still are denied actual roles and responsibilities in important decision making. So these are hard feelings to take, but again, in this situation, the good news is that the results of lifting up those different feelings and experience actually was incentive to produce a book. And it's called The Toolkit for Meaningful Youth Participation. When I'm finished, I'll put it in the chat box. It just came to me yesterday, hot off the presses, and it's quite practical in bringing up the very issues that I spoke of and offering perspective, offering alternatives. Well, what can we do when we feel this way? So that's a very good homemade kind of resource that did come out of a group of young adults who were all part of the URI network. And it's, yeah, a lot of practical situations. So wherever we encounter it, hate speech, I think in its dramatic and its subtle expressions, it's not going to go away anytime soon. So I encourage that each of us make it a priority for ourselves and within our organization to acknowledge it is here with us and to humbly but actively learn better ways to listen and to treat one another. I want to close with 2 practical points. What we're involved in is personal. It's not out there. It really connects with most of our own experiences. And what we elders learned in school and in university, we learned over 40 and 50 years ago. The world has changed. We do have wisdom from life experience, but we don't understand well the world as it is now. So elders need the knowledge and leadership of youth to meet today's issues. Many elders have learned resilience, have learned perspective that can be removed and a bit distanced, which is helpful, and wisdom. But youth and elders need to listen to each other and give elders a chance to offer assurance, offer encouragement, and offer courage. So confronting hate speech is also political. I think both Tahil and Rens mentioned it. As autocracies gain power across the world and use hate speech, propaganda to secure power, all people are called to stand up for core democratic values that demand respectful listening and the inclusion of all voices. We're called to create, all of us are called to create safe spaces for diverse people to come together and raise their voices and be listened to and make decisions that affect their lives. So it's the impact runs deep. Combating hate speech is about standing for justice, and it's about upholding values at the heart of democracy. Every day we make choices about how we interact with other people. Important choices that can be overlooked as being trivial, but these choices define us. They're statements of who we choose to be in this lifetime and what impact we will have on the ones close to us and our nations and the whole world. So thank you so much for this opportunity to offer some thoughts about this really crucial topic.
Wow, thank you very much. I listened to you in different occasions, but always somehow you managed to impress me by all the level of the wisdom and the words that you are sharing with us. So I'm really glad that you accepted the invitation to join us, and thank you very much for sharing all these important things that I hope will inspire all our audience to take the action, as you said. And yes, you highlighted some very important things. We all need to fight, especially injustice, as this is something that is hurting all of us. And I'm glad that we managed to bring together Religion for Peace and United Religion Initiative, which is their core values, are having the desire to create peace in the world where there will be more justice and peace and healing for the whole human beings. So I'm really happy that we managed to bring these younger people and wisdom from the older generation that we speak today. And also thank you very much, Sally, for all these practical things that you share with us, because I think that we all need to take action. An idea of this webinar and panel discussion is not just to share our ideas and thoughts, but to motivate our audience and ourselves as well to do something after this webinar, at least maybe to rethink some of our stereotypes and prejudices that we may have. And next time when we sit on our computer or meet somebody else on the street, maybe to think twice how we will approach these human beings and what we will share with them. So thank you once again. And you also mentioned something very important, this practical toolkit that we will share a link to it, and I'm really happy that URI produce something like that and that we will be able to share it with others. But you also mentioned in a few times that hate speech should have alternative and counter narratives, that we should fight with hate speech not just by ignoring it, but we need to bring some extra values. And I'm so happy that my colleague Amina is with me here today. And even though we will now move to the Q&A section, before that, I would like to give floor to her, because we were also part of the project called Alter Hate, which was the project organized by young people from Religious for Peace Europe. And the idea was to provide alternative or counter narratives to the hate speech. So Amina, I think that this is the right place right now to share a few information about that before we move to next session of our webinar. So thank you, Sally, once again, and Amina, floor is yours.
Thank you, Leila. Thank you very much. I will try to share a few words about the Alter Hate, which is what the campaign that we had the opportunity to do in the Western Balkans specifically. We were concentrating on Serbia, Albania, and Bosnia-Herzegovina. But also it's really important to say it's a part of the larger platform called Speech for Change, which is a platform within Religions for Peace. And more precisely, we were doing it inside the framework of European Interfaith Youth Network of Religions for Peace. But one of the outputs, one of the very, let's say, immediate results that we had and that we actually did last year on the occasion of the World Interfaith Harmony Week were actually two important things. It was, again, one webinar where we talked about interfaith perspectives and interfaith importance of countering hate speech to, let's say, bringing better interfaith cooperation. But very important and very dear to me output is that we try to root our alternative response in the interfaith. And we decided to create a poster where we decided to, just dig into different religious traditions. And we found 11 different religious traditions. And again, I want to say that there are many more spiritual directions, traditions that were not a part of our poster, because again, we were working also with limited resources, limited time, limited number of people who could work on this poster. And it took us a lot of time to actually come up with this poster and to find quotes and verses inside religious traditions, inside religious scriptures, and inside just oral traditions of different religious traditions, and create this poster where we actually symbolically called No Hate Speech Rule poster. And we found in those 11 different traditions, we found quotes that are supporting good speech, that are supporting positive speech that is actually encouraging people to listen to each other, not to use harsh words, and also sometimes there were some quotes that are basically somehow prohibiting people to use harsh words, to hate each other, and to use words that are going to do harm to those to whom we are speaking. So I will just briefly share with you this poster. Some of you had the opportunity to see it already. The poster is already available on our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and it's completely free for use because we had some inquiries from people. Is it okay that they use it, that they promote it, that they put it in their classrooms even? So for me, this is like really important output and really important. It's really important to hear from people, their reactions and their wish actually to use this as a learning material. So I'm just sharing this very briefly with you, and probably you will see it. So just tell me, give me thumbs up when you can see the poster. And as you can see, we decided to dig in, let's call it, into Sikhism, Buddhism, Judaism, Baha'i faith, Jainism, Hinduism, Confucianism, Islam, Zoroastrianism, Taoism, and Christianity. And of course, as I said, there are many other spiritual paths, many other traditions that we did not manage to include, but we invited people to send us also the quotes. So maybe we will have another version of the poster. Maybe we'll have no hate speech rule #2, or maybe we'll have something like more comprehensive and added with other religious traditions. But I just wanted to share this as one of the ways how we as young people wanted to react to hate speech, how we as young people wanted to root ourselves in the interfaith and, show that that religion, is a source of positivity, is a source for peace, not just for violence, because unfortunately in media, we mostly see how religion is being manipulated and used for not so nice actions. So we decided to show something different, something alternative. And that's how this No Hate Speech Rule poster was actually born. And I do hope that you like it. And I do hope that also our viewers will be able to see the poster and will be able to get something out of it. But you can definitely find it on our Alter Hate Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, as I said. So Leila, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share this with you as well. And thank you to you panelists for your amazing inputs. I have to say, Leila, that all the 3 speeches were so powerful. I really, I found myself asking, like, where were all these people when we were doing campaigns? Where were all those inputs? Because you really touched my heart. I'm not saying this just because you are our panelists, but you really spoke from your hearts, and this is important because you understand and you see when people are speaking from their hearts. And it really touched me because, you spoke about hate speech and about the real problem without citing different definitions, citing, you can do this, you can do that, because you're really speaking about practical and very important things that we need to consider when we are countering hate speech. And I really hope that our viewers actually could sense this. I was really moved by also personal experiences that you decided to share with us, because those personal experiences, I think they have to be much more present in the media, much more present on social media, much more present in the public, that people actually see how people, react to hate speech and what hate speech can do to people. Because a lot of times I spoke to different, especially to young people, and they say, sometimes, it's just words, it's hate speech, maybe it's not going to harm anybody, we were just joking, etc., etc. And then, like, it's not a joke, because at some points this hate speech can lead to hate crimes, unfortunately. Luckily, most of the hate speech is not that dangerous, but we can never know, who can be listening and who can actually take seriously what we just said and act upon that. And we saw that many times, with the public persons who were spreading hate speech. They were just thinking, okay, I'm saying something because it's my freedom of speech. And then actually somebody takes that very, very seriously and acts upon it. But again, thank you for your inputs. I had a lot of questions roaming around my mind when you were speaking, but I will actually try to address to each of you one of the questions that came to my mind that I would like to learn more, but I will also give opportunity to Leila if she wants to say something. But I would like to start with Tahil because he spoke the first, and I'm just going to follow the order. And Tahil, I know that a few days ago you moderated one event that was again dealing with hate speech. It was called The Power of Words, to say or not to say. And you had also 3 amazing panelists. I know that because I was part of the event, so I had the opportunity to listen to those people. But I would like to ask you just to share with us few highlights from this event. Just few highlights, few important messages that you actually found in this event. So Tahil, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you so much, Amina. Thank you for the plug for our last event. It's nice to be able to share some of the highlights from that space, because I think we oftentimes do not consider the role of how we use our very own languages in the nature of addressing hate speech itself. Because we always look at hate speech from the frame of, this is specific language that we're using against a specific community that is targeted. But sometimes what actually happens is, both historically and traditionally, we note that there are terms and phrases that are picked up by our own mother tongues that are actually rooted in injustice, that are rooted in the oppression of certain communities. Especially from the context of looking at the lens of anti-Blackness, many communities around the world use words and phrases to be able to describe people of African descent or of darker skin colors as people who are inferior in society. And one of the major things that actually came out of our conversations with folks from a couple of days ago was the fact that the nature of challenging this means being able to step up our ability to be able to stand in the way of using this language. When it comes to people using this language very naturally, they don't assume that they're going to be challenged, and we don't think about how certain words and phrases have a certain etymology or origin that allow them to prosper in certain communities. So it is up to us in a lot of ways to be able to step in and say, I think you should consider using another term or phrase that allows a person or a community to feel humanized. A good example that came up was of a colleague of ours by the name of Firaz, who was speaking to his friend from Saudi Arabia. I don't remember the term exactly, but when it came to referring people of African descent particularly, the term that the Saudi colleague of his used to describe them is translated to the word slave. And the person used it so naturally in conversation that Firaz got taken aback and said, I'm sorry, am I hearing this word correctly? Are you referring to this person by this term? The person said, yeah, it's just been a part of conversation. So like, what other term do I have? And Firaz took the initiative to be able to say, actually, you could just call the person by their skin color, or you could just call them by their name rather than demeaning them in the way by using such a derogatory term. And oftentimes we don't feel comfortable in being able to step in to be able to interrupt or try to cause discomfort when it comes to these kinds of things. But a major point that I actually brought up is, how do you stand up for people or a community when they're not in the room? And what Firaz did was one of the key ways that you're able to do that. When you know that someone is using certain derogatory terms and they sometimes use it only because they're in the safety of one of their own communities, it's up to us as allies and accomplices for justice to be able to step in and say, no, that is not the right thing to do. You should not be doing that. Because it takes a lot of effort from folks who are learning about communities, who are showing solidarity, to be able to do so when spaces do not have the representation necessary for folks to be able to intervene and say, no, this is not the language you should be using. And what also became very clear is that the nature of using language itself can pose a lot of different challenges. One of our colleagues on the panel by the name of Izzy had spoken about his journey in getting to study Hebrew specifically. And when he was asked about, what he does for a living, what he does for his studies, and he had mentioned that he studies Hebrew, someone explicitly asked him, why are you studying the language of the enemy? In other instances, one of our colleagues, Sibu, who is a polyglot in her own right, has studied numerous languages, decided to go to China and was using Mandarin Chinese with people and was abused by people who thought she was of a different ethnic origin, but was still able to speak Mandarin Chinese. Mind you, she is not Chinese in origin in any way. She comes from a Costa Rican and a Polish background. But her ability and her interest in studying Chinese brought her into a space, and because she looked different and was speaking the language of the people, that people were disrespecting her. So the nature of hate speech is very complicated. It is rooted in so many different forms of injustice and doesn't look the same everywhere you go. Hate speech can be directed at you. You can espouse speech that is culturally a part of your community, or you can just talk and hate can be thrown towards at you for using speech. So the nature of being able to combat all of those things is rooted in us being able to speak up and to stand up for what is right in the face of any of those challenges. And I think it becomes even more clear that in the nature of addressing them, we do have to learn about the nuance of where language is used and how it's being used. Because oftentimes we don't know the roots of why language is the way that it is. Much of it can be rooted to, colonialism and the ability of those who have conquered various countries within Asia and Africa, to be able to hold on to language, mainly because of languages like English and French that sort of pass on from generation to generation, and many other times through observation of what the communities sort of examine and express, you're able to also determine that there has been, connotations that are intentionally negative towards specific communities that have developed over time. So this is both a historical challenge to the status quo and both a modern challenge to the status quo when we're trying to counter hate speech.
Thank you very much, Tahil, for this input. And yeah, it is very interesting perspective when we can discuss about language itself being the root causes of the hate speech. So thank you for bringing this dimension. And I want to use this opportunity to invite all of our people who are following us right now and watching this live stream to go to your Facebook account and the account of the organization who co-organized this webinar yesterday, and to take a look, as it was really interesting discussion and a lot of inputs that relate to today's topic as well. Now I want to, as this presenter on the TV say, like we have interruption in the program, I would like now to bring us back to our speakers. So Dr. Lakshmi, welcome. We hope that you managed to find a space to join us. We understand that we are organizing events in different time zones, then it can be really confusing. As we said at the beginning, some of us are coming in the early morning, afternoon, evening. So we are glad that you managed to join us. And of course, we will be more than happy to hear your input to this topic as well. So far, we have our three amazing speakers, the inputs, and we start with the question and answer, but we will now give floor to you to give your inputs on this topic in like 5 to 10 minutes, and then we can continue with the question. But before we give floor to you, I would like just shortly to introduce you as well. You also have impressive biographies like all our other panelists, so I will try just shortly to give some glimpse of your incredible work, and I'm sure that our followers will be able to read more about it. So Dr. Lakshmi Vyas dedicates a lot of her time for charitable organization, and her main objective is to unite the Hindus of Europe under one umbrella, Hindu Forum of Europe. She coordinated the recently celebrated Diwali in European Parliament that was held last year on the 9th of November, which brings together attendance of members of European Parliament, high commissioners, NGOs, spiritual organizations, non-political communities from UK and all over the Europe. She also coordinates the UK census on their consultation and being a standing advisory council on religion and education. Dr. Lakshmi is also well versed in Hinduism and has clear view of immigration and integration as the head of quality. And she also works with youth people and learners from all walks of life. She also had quite impressive academic career with writing a different number of books and publications. So we are really happy to have you with us here today, and I would like to give you floor to give your inputs on important topic that we are discussing. So Dr. Lakshmi, floor is yours. Please unmute yourself.
Nice. Thank you very much, Eliza, for that wonderful introduction. I was wondering, are we starting the meeting, or are we going to start it at 5 o'clock?
Yes, so the meeting already started. We are in the middle of the meeting already, 1 hour. So you were a little bit late, as probably there were confusion by the time zones. So our speaker already gave their input. We started with Q&A session, but we will now give floor to you and continue with the Q&A.
I'm very sorry about that, that I joined late.
No problem, it happens.
Confusion. It was the time confusion. I'm very sorry about that.
No problem. We are happy to have you with us. So please, floor is yours.
Yeah, hate speech and countering hate speech is one of the biggest problem for leaders. And of course, people who may run the organization, different organizations, it's a nightmare sometimes. So it is hate speech is a form of expression through which speakers intend to vilify, humiliate, or incite hatred against a group of people. All these things everybody must have spoken, so I'm not going over it again. I would like to say that technology has made it a lot easier for all of us to share ideas and information, seek advice, and much more. And while most of this interaction is kind and respectful, there are those who use it to demean, insult, bully, and abuse. Hate speech, by and large, is dangerous and may lead to low esteem, depression, isolation, anger, antisocial, and self-destructive behaviors. So, generally, we as leaders have to provide the right direction to parents and educators seeking to prevent children under their care from experiencing or engaging in hate speech, as well as dealing with it in healthy ways when they encounter it. But it's not just for child caregivers. Hate speech can affect people of any age, including adults, which is why we need to curb and allow it to happen at the same time punish the perpetrators. Here, I'll give you two live examples of what happened in the past 1 or 2 years of hate speech. And they're true incidences, and which maybe all of you may be familiar with it also. The first is the Oxford University incidents where Rashmi Samant, a small town girl from Karnataka, was all excited about being elected the first Indian woman to be the president of the prestigious Oxford University Students' Union. Rashmi Samant, who ran her campaign on decolonization and inclusivity platform, won the elections. She made the headlines in India and across the world. All major Indian and diaspora news outlets proudly covered the news. 2 days later, however, it all fell apart. Samant had to resign amid allegations of racism, anti-Semitism, and transphobia. A few days later, Samant quit Oxford and was on her flight back to India after being bullied, threatened, and abused with hate speeches for being a Hindu. Leading the charge against Samant was a staff member who still works in Oxford University, and he goes scot-free when all the trauma was faced by Samant, who attributed all this to cyberbullying, hate speech against Hindu student. This is the story. And finally, I think Rashmi Samant has come back and she has been reinstated, but the staff who actually initiated all this, he's still there. He's not moved out. This is what happened in Oxford University. And it was widely publicized by BBC and other newspapers. The second issue, again, an Hindu, a harassment not by Hindu, for the Hindu students. This is in New Jersey, Rutgers University. Audrey Truskay was the faculty member who is the main person who was instigating the Hindu students, talking to them badly, giving them mental agony, bullying them, and some students went traumatic. So what happened was the Yuva Student Union of the Rutgers University, they all gathered together and presented an application to the university. Truskay is well known for her anti-Hindu bigotry, while Hindu-phobic social media commentary, cyberbullying, and above all, hate speech. Almost 3 years ago, Truskay had tweeted that Mata Sita in Valmiki's Ramayana basically tells Bhagwan Rama that he is a misogynist, pig, and uncouth. These are all worded from whatever it came through. Nothing is cooked by me. She tweeted an announcement of her extremely provocative new course, History of South Asia, Modi to Mughals. And also, she suggested that Bhagwan Lakshmana was lusting after Mata Sita. So, this was done openly and nothing was done. She did not allow the festival of Holi to happen in the university. She tried to block a campus event on Kashmiri Hindus, where the filmmaker Vivek Agnihotri was the main speaker. The students were shocked and crestfallen when they found out that the Rutgers administration did not only support Truskay, but also chided students and others' attacks on Truskay and her academic freedom. Truskay is full of hate and demean Hindus openly and was spewing hate and hate speeches against Hindus. She also instigated Hindu students to join her and tried to achieve her end through them. She was openly abusing the Hindu gods. The sad news is the university authorities did not take any action against her. The students were forced to go in groups and came around with copies of Truskay's social media posts. In their presentation to the university administration, they demonstrated how Truskay had repeatedly and consciously mocked Hindu deities, misrepresented the revered ancient texts such as Ramayana and Mahabharata, and tried to whitewash other historical atrocities in the Indian subcontinent. Finally, after several rounds of presentation, the university bosses apologized, but Truskay goes ahead with her agenda. She is still free. So hate speech is something which happens all around. It's a very, very difficult scenario to tackle individually. So we can counter it very intelligently and very politely. So some of the points, how can we counter the speech or the trolls? So always challenge the message, never the person who spread it. This is very important. Secondly, use facts and data to call out generalization and inaccuracies. I would also add here, display the harm of hate speech by showing a different perspective, politely. And be polite in your reply. Don't become abusive yourself. Sorry. The biggest source of hateful comments on the internet is trolls. A troll is a profile intentionally created to spread controversial or off-topic content and provoke inflammatory responses while remaining anonymous. So once again, we need not keep quiet about it. If you're not scared, if you're not afraid of anything, you can counter them. So what some things which you need to remember is we need to recognize them first. Here are some points which you can follow. Their name is usually non-descriptive, the one who trolls, and or even just series of numbers. Remember, trolls always aim to remain anonymous. Secondly, not setting a profile picture. They generally don't do that, so that makes them suspicious. The same applies if they use famous person's image or a stock photo. Next, look at their followers. How many do they have? Are they trolls themselves? And lastly, now look at their account behavior. Most of them, their activity is very irregular and repetitive. So once you have identified the trolls, don't give them the recognition they search for. When you see their provocative comments on social media, the best thing to do is probably ignore them. Never feed the trolls. If you are a victim of hate speech or online shaming, it might be better to mute your account that is provoking you and harming you. When you recognize the troll, immediately block and report it. So you have to learn how to respond to the Facebook, etc., etc. And it is better that you work in a group rather than in single. Let your friends also join you in replying to such notes. And look after yourself very carefully. So these are some of the words which would like to suggest to people to counter hack. At the same time, there is too much of politics in all our rules and regulations. It is sometimes very difficult to keep a watch on all the atrocities that happen in the social media, television, and news media. Each country has to monitor its own social media and remove the apps in all those mobiles and cell phones who deal with abuses. I feel the media is also paid to do hate speech. And generally, hate speech weakens and destroys communities, sowing seeds of fear, hatred, and distrust. When left unchecked, it can lead to violence and even genocide. So when I'm talking about the Hindus, Hindus all around the world are generally soft-spoken, God-fearing, and they believe in their scriptures. The term Sarva Dharma Sambhava, it means respect to all the religions and follow the path accordingly and do what is right and fair. I will conclude with this statement that we have and will always remain committed. We as Hindus, we will always remain committed to our guiding principle of Vasudhaiva Kudumpakam. That is, the whole world is one family. Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam means the whole world is one family. The diversity of the Hinduism is uniquely beautiful, and the principle of Tamaso Ma Jyotir Gamaya, meaning leading those benighted by ignorance to the light through equation and genuine mutual learning. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for this reminder about hate speech and how we can react, and on all these concrete examples that you share, even though some of them were very painful, but I think that it's very important to highlight them and to discuss about them. So thank you, Dr. Lakshmi, for joining us. We are glad to have you with us, and you definitely contribute with your speech, and especially highlighting from your Hindu perspective, which is highly appreciated. And now we have about 15 more minutes left, so I will now give floor back to Amina, because she mentioned that she has some more questions for other panelists, and the time is really running when you have this nice discussion. But Amina, floor is yours, and let's discuss about a few more things that were on your mind.
Thank you, Leila. Thank you very much. And as you said, like, I really had a lot of questions that I wanted to ask our panelists. And my second question will go to the corner of Renz, because we know that Renz, as a psychologist, he works a lot with people on mental health, and mental health is also connected to hate speech at some point. So I wanted to ask you, how does hate speech actually affects our mental health, but both of those who are targets of the hate speech, but also of those who are perpetrating hate speech? I think in conversations about hate speech, we tend to discredit people who are perpetrating it. We don't speak about it. So how does, all of that hatred that we try to perpetrate also affects us, and what we can do about it? I know question is probably too wide and you could speak hours about it, but please give us some of your thoughts about it. Thank you.
Let me try to do that in a few minutes so you can ask the other questions that you have. The effect first on those who are targets or victims of hate speech. Since hate speech incites violence, it incites discrimination and hatred towards a certain individual, that person experiences severe threats in varying degrees. And this threat becomes not just a threat to their lives, but also a threat to their dignities. Now, when each of us are facing threats, that causes us a significant amount of stress. And the worst part of that would be what we call traumatic stress, or trauma in simple terms. And whenever we are traumatized, that causes negative impacts in the way that we think, the way that we feel, and the way that we relate with other people. Some of our panelists has mentioned that hate speech has caused depression. Suicide is actually the second leading cause of death among young people all over the world. It's not even, actually now it's the leading cause of death. And a lot of that comes from hate speech as well, because it removes your sense of humanity. It pulls down your self-esteem, and of course, you're afraid for your life. So it causes you to hide in fear. So it causes many of these negative impacts on an individual that often leads to many long-term complications in their emotional and psychological well-being. Now, we do not usually talk about perpetrators of hate speech, but when we try to understand where all that hatred is coming from, we also need to look at the cycle of violence and the cycle of hatred that exists. There are theories that explain that someone who might be bullying or abusive of someone else themselves may have experienced a form of abuse or violence or bullying. So the human mind basically learns what it observes. So if you as a young child, for example, grows up in an environment that fosters violence, hatred, and all of these things, you learn that that's the normal way of doing things. So if you grow up in a household where your parents, for example, throws violent curses with one another, they disrespect one another, you learn that that is the way to deal with other people, and it continues. Okay, you become a victim of it. You start victimizing other people. Those you victimize will start victimizing other people. So it's a never-ending cycle that perpetuates violence and hatred. So when we look at that perspective, as much as we would like to say that we condemn those who are doing hate speech, if we ourselves condemn them, then what makes us different from them, right? If they're doing hate speech and you respond with hate speech, we'll never achieve the goal of ending hate speech. That's why we respond with love, we respond with understanding, with empathy, with care, all of this because we try to understand that this human being is starting to promote hate because they may be hurt. In my practice as a clinical psychologist, we often say that hurt people hurt people. So maybe we try to understand where they're coming from and then understand that pain, give them love, give them care, empathy, and understanding. Maybe that way we can help them change the way they do things. I hope I answered your question. I mean, it's quite a short time, but I hope I was able to explain that.
Thank you very much, friends. As you said, it's very short time, but this is coming from you as somebody who's working a lot with people with, on mental health. And I'm sure that our viewers now will, take this into account because, as you said, it's always easy to just start judging, and it's always easy to just start, somehow pushing back. But instead of trying to put yourselves in as Tahil said, sometimes the shoes are not always easy to put ourselves in, and it's not always easy to understand. But anyways, thank you very much. And I think you provided very clear, very concise answer in such a short time. And I really appreciate it. And my third question will go to the Sally's Corner, because I would like to ask you a bit more, because you were mentioning a lot intergenerational cooperation, and you were mentioning a lot what you were doing in URI, but can you tell us how effectively we can actually, foster and go forward with this intergenerational approach, how we can meaningfully include young people, because you were mentioning precisely that, unfortunately, you put young people, and young people very often feel as tokens and as somebody just to brag about that we have them. So what would be your, let's say, some kind of advices or tips and tricks for all of us working in this, especially in the interfaith spaces, because I think these spaces are super important, and it's very important that we connect those on the seniors with the younger ones, and provide the space for exchange. And we are already exchanging on an interfaith basis, but what about this intergenerational one? Thank you. Again, not so much time to answer, but please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, well, thank you, Amina. It is so much easier to talk about it than to do it and to make the changes. I'll just say a few things. When we were doing that project, one elder gentleman in my age group, he said, he was humble and open. And he said, I really don't understand the challenges that the 25-year-olds are facing. I'm curious. I really want to know. So for elders, check your curiosity. Do you really want to know what's inside a person who's in their 20s or in their 30s right now? What's going on, what their fears are, what their hopes are? So that struck me as something that isn't about a manual, it's about giving true curiosity. The other thought that we did, and I think it was Tahil, this appreciative inquiry, this way of creating a condition where you really are asking each other questions in that same manner about who you are and where you have been your best in your life on both sides. So within an organization, for instance, we think we can just sort of notice it and then it'll kind of get better. But I don't think so. I think you have to make it a priority and bring people of different age groups, in this case, into these kinds of conversations where they are asked to tell each other about their stories, about their life issues, and then be listened to. This book, this toolkit, go to it. It has very practical answers to just these questions. They point out myths and assumptions, and then they point out what the reality is. And then it also gives what you can do to bring people together. So I think I'll stop there and really refer people to that toolkit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sally. I already shared the link to the toolkit on our Facebook comments below this very panel discussion that is live streamed. So I do hope that people will have the opportunity to see it. Yesterday I saw it. It was very nice, nicely done, and it's very, very lively and very youthful, and with all of those colors and as you said, very, very practical recommendations on how to meaningfully include young people. And I think more resources like that are very, very much needed, and more conversations like this are much needed, because intergenerational cooperation is something that we are definitely speaking, and we are definitely doing a lot about in the last few years, I would say. I think it wasn't that prominent before, but in the last few years, it became very important that we need to work together in order to, let's say, somehow confront and face all the issues that this planet and we as human beings on it are facing. So these intergenerational perspectives are super important. So my fourth question, which is going in the corner of Dr. Lakshmi, will be about this cooperation between youngsters and between seniors, and about hate speech, and about these initiatives countering hate speech. So can you tell us if you are familiar with some of these kinds of cooperations, and if you are familiar and if you have worked, because I know that you have a lot of experience in this, and I had the opportunity to be on one forum that is concerning hate speech against migrants and refugees, and I had the opportunity to work with you. So maybe you can just give us a few inputs and hints about the initiative that you worked on. Thank you. Please unmute yourself.
Yes, I have been working on with the migrants and refugees, not personally, but on their work and how we can support them. So cultural diversity in Europe should be taken as an advantage and celebrated instead of being seen it as negative thing. That is number one. And secondly, migrants and refugees, they have misperceptions and misunderstanding regarding the laws, customs, and conditions in their host country, because they come from different places. These gaps can be reduced by promoting their participation. Moreover, their full non-intervention decisions that have an impact on their lives. So, we keep the migrants at a distance. Instead, cooperate them in the, take them in your work, and make them more and more inclusive. That would help a lot. So my request to each and every person, mix with a variety of people, much different from you, may be difficult in the beginning, but it is very important for religious leaders and important people holding good portfolios, that they mix with a variety of people, political leaders and managers to know different kind of people and rediscover your relationship and make life happy for everyone. So if you mix, for example, people travel all around the world and they have different kind of food, but why not mix with different kind of people and enjoy their food, going to their house or restaurants or something like that. So that sort of an attitude has to develop all around. So valuing multiculturalism is an important aspect of hate speech and abusive speeches. So it's very important that everyone should start liking or at least start doing a sort of a multicultural group work or something like that, which will bring people together. Because every religion is different, but they have some common things, and finally we are all human beings. We are not any other persons. We are all human beings, so why can't we come together? If we make an effort, definitely we can.
Thank you, Dr. Lakshmi. Thank you for this, let's say, call to people for coming together and basically asking ourselves if we are coming and if we are human beings, and why can we just come together and understand each other. But thank you for addressing this issue of hate speech against migrants and refugees, because Europe for the past years was all entangled in this, a lot of people were migrating from different parts of the world to Europe. So Europe was facing this, and a lot of hate speech was rising there. I had the opportunity to work on several initiatives in Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is just small country on the route, on the migrant route, and not a lot of migrants coming, but still there is, boiling hate speech, because it's something unknown, it's something that we don't know, and it's something that we, are, as you said, like not trying to understand, not trying to come as human beings and understand what those people actually went through to come to our country, and what kind of road and path they had to go through. And you just have to understand what can happen to you that you have to leave your home to go somewhere else. This is the question that mostly we don't ask ourselves when we are working with refugees and migrants, and this is something that we should definitely think of. So Leila, I finished with my questions, and I have a lot of them now, but it's already 6:30 p.m. in my in my place, and it's very late in the Philippines. So I would like to send Rens to go to sleep, and for the sake of time, I will just hand you over to wrap up, to finish, and thank you very much again.
Thank you very much, Amina. Yes, as I said, when we have this nice discussion, always time runs really quickly, and there's so many open questions, but there is beauty in this, because then we have chance to meet again and to continue discussion and to open floor for the discussion in online sphere again. So I would just like to thank all of you for participating, for giving your very valuable insight, for being such great an inspiration, and not just inspiration, but for all this call for action. And I hope that all our viewers will learn something, that they already learned something from this, and then they will take action after this. And so according to all your suggestions and all your nice inputs, I want to invite all of those viewers who are watching us right now to step outside of their comfort zone, to try to be more empathic, active listening, and now to go outside if it is not too late in their place, and maybe to meet somebody that they didn't have chance to meet earlier. So as you all said, may peace prevail on earth, and let's all us come together for the sake of the peace, justice, and healing. So thank you once again, and thanks all of those of you who were watching us on Facebook, and especially thank you for all of you who woke up early in the morning to join us and who stayed late in the evening. It shows how dedicated you are for this work, and I'm sure with all of your efforts and passion and knowledge that we will bring some more positive change to this world. So thank you again, and thank you, Amina, for co-hosting this event.
Thank you.